Semiotics. And you need a pen that writes. See how this one goes. All right, so it's about signs and codes. Raphael, could you go get a black marker from Teresa in the psychology part? Just do that, Brian. See any more here? Black marker. All right, so what's a sign? Study of signs. There's different kinds of signs. And I go over these signs, these different kinds of signs in my lecture notes. There's three that we're going to focus on here a little bit. The author mentions them in various ways, but not as systematically as I want to lay them out, as I lay them out in my lecture notes. The three primary signs that we're going to develop a knowledge of and their interaction and overlap are the icon, the index, and the symbol. Okay? Icon, index, and symbol. Icon, index, and symbol. And this doesn't write at all. Thank you. Icon, index. These are all common words, all three of these. We have some knowledge of what they mean. And our concern here is, where are you guys going? You leaving? You signing the attendance sheet and walking out? What's up with that? Who are those guys? Huh? Can't do that, right? That's not cool. All right, so an icon. What's an icon? How does an icon represent? What's an icon? Give me an example. Okay, yeah.
Like
Statue of Liberty is what will be an icon of the Statue of Liberty. Statue of Liberty is a symbol, isn't it? I guess in and of itself, but a picture of the Statue of Liberty is an icon, right? A photograph of the Statue of Liberty is an icon, because it's an image of the statue, right? So what were you going to say?
I was going to say it's kind of like an idol, like a Mayan idol, like a small statue of like a dragon or something. That's like an icon.
Okay, it's an image of something else that it resembles, right?
Yeah, like it resembles a god of some kind.
Right. So an icon represents, by virtue of its resemblance to its object. Okay? Got that? An icon represents, by virtue of its resemblance. Resemblance to its quote-unquote object in the, most general sense. All right? So, what are some icons in our everyday lives that we, work with and
Would like a woman's restroom be one?
Okay, sure. The image on women's or men's restrooms typically are iconic. You can tell which is the male and which is the female usually, right? Sometimes they'll do little indexical twists on those icons and it might be a little confusing until you walk in and see things that shouldn't be there or not there that should be. So yeah, so those are icons, and They are motivated by what they represent. Okay? In other words, the image is motivated by the object. That is, let's take the Statue of Liberty again. We all know what it looks like, right? So the image of it, the photograph of it, is motivated by what it is. If you're going to draw a picture of it, you've got to have the picture in your head in order to draw the image of the Statue of Liberty. Okay, so resemblance to the object is motivated by the object. It's a motivated relationship. Now, to make this even more complicated, there are degrees of motivation, right? There's degrees of motivation. We'll just use 3 examples. Degrees of motivation. If you want an exact resemblance of what it is you're representing, best way to get it is a photograph, right? A photograph of the actual thing, whatever it may be. So, a photograph is the most motivated of all icons. What's another example of an icon that's motivated by its object, but it's not exact? It's a little distorted, or, yeah.
A drawing or a sketch.
Yeah, a drawing or a sketch. A drawing, sketch, drawing, a sketch, painting. Okay? And what would be a third level of icon that's motivated? Not as exact as a photograph, or, of course, the drawing, the sketch, or the painting can be more or less realist, right? Or impressionistic, or, I guess you could say, I don't know, it's a third level. Any ideas? Yeah.
Like a model or something?
Okay, all right, it can be a model. Yeah, I mean, it's along the same lines. I was thinking more like a caricature, So in some ways, I guess a caricature would fit under sketch. I mean, so for example, you could have a caricature. It's not really exact. Like a caricature of the president or of a famous person. Okay, so these are degrees of resemblance to its object. But in any case, every time when you look at it, you know that's what it is. That's what it represents. All right? So any questions? We deal with icons every day, right? We deal with icons in language and in various ways, but mostly we deal with icons on our desktops, through our laptops. Icons function as ways for us to work in one way or another. All right? This is an icon here, right? You know what this is? If you don't, and if you park in that spot and you don't have the tag, then you get a $500 fine in Pittsburgh. $500 fine. I know this by experience. My car, the nose of my car was in, this is a parallel parking spot. And it was just, I just couldn't get it quite, so the nose of my car was stuck into a handicapped spot. And I got nailed. I protested. I contested it. It got knocked down to $50, so I was lucky. But the original fine was $500 for parking in there.
That is very expensive. But
Isn't that high? That's really,
yeah.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah, $500. Okay, so let's talk about icons in language. How do icons function in language? This is important for intercultural communication because we can draw upon iconic forms in order to express our meaning. Okay, so how do icons function in language? Yeah.
What does that word say below
Caricature. A caricature is an iconic form. It's not very well written, is it? How do icons function in language? The sound has to resemble what it represents, right? We call that onomatopoeia in poetic terms. What's an example of an onomatopoeic word or term? Yeah. What? Boom! Yeah, Patrick jumped.
Or jump even.
Or even jump, or buzz, or, any word that sounds like what it represents is iconic. Okay? Look at this series. These two different series. These are how icons function in conjugations for high, higher, highest, low, lower, lowest. How are these series iconic? They're iconic in exactly the same way, even though the semantics are opposites. You see the iconicity? You add a phoneme for each increase in the meaning. Okay? So iconically, these two series mean the same thing, even though they're opposites semantically. You following me? So there's an increase. The increase of phonemes are iconic with the increase in emphasis or valence, whatever the case may be. Okay, so iconicity functions through the body as well, right? So when you cannot communicate in the language of the other person, or when we did the Barbie game, for example, some of you had to work with your body in order to communicate meaning, right? Diamonds, Trump, etc. So when you are trying to communicate with people from another culture who don't speak your language and you don't speak theirs, we resort to corporality. We resort to our bodies to help create images so that some understanding can take place. Got any gestures that you use with your body to convey meaning iconically? Yeah. Oh, come on. That's not iconic. It's symbolic. No, it's not. What's it going to resemble? Anguish? It's a symbol. Meaning, we've attached a meaning to that symbol. Okay? So, I don't want to go there. Let's think of another example. We'll come back to that. Another symbol, yeah.
About like when you try to distract how something big is, you don't have like always like.
You're
like small.
Exactly, that's right. So there's something little, it's little, or it's big. What else? Yeah.
I know that you're joking, that, you
Yeah.
know what that means.
Right. I'm joking. Or, what else? You're hungry. This actually happened to me once. What's this? I need food. Give me food. Right? So we use gestures in our body. Okay, get off the phones. Off the phones. We use gestures in our body to express ourselves iconically when language fails us in some way. Okay? Like this. Can't hear you. Right? It's an iconic gesture. So the body is used iconically in many, many different kinds of ways. All right, let's go to indexes. An index. How does an index function? Indexicality. What's an index? Any ideas? See, you did a lot of reading while the strike was going on. Should have just made last Thursday the reading day, then we would have no problem. What's an index? We have an index in the book, don't we? It's an index. What's the index in the back of the book do for you? Yeah.
It gives you all the definitions of the terms.
That's a glossary.
So
That's a glossary. That's more symbolic.
always the person included.
So the index does what?
Helps you find resources to your book.
Right. And where do you go? So you find the term in the back of the book. Okay, I'm looking up index. So you go to the index to look up index. And what do you find? You find page numbers in the book. So it's connected. Right? It directs you. It points. It has an ostensive function. Aristotle called it the tecmerion, and he used it as part of his theory of rhetoric and argumentation. That if you can find an index, a tecmerion that points to, like DNA points, right? That's an index. Fingerprint points. Then you have, verification. There's verifiability in the index. Okay? So it's a pointing function. An index is a pointing function. Okay? So, what are some examples, other examples, in the body or in language of an index? Well, first, let's get clear. It's got to be connected. We use the word contiguity. Okay? It resembles, but not resembles, it represents by virtue of its contiguity or connection to its object. Okay? So it's connected. It's connected. So what are some examples, other examples of an index? Yeah.
Wouldn't smiling be one?
Yeah, usually, not always, right? I mean, somebody can be smiling like, oh, I'm really glad to see you. I want to kill you.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that can be a fake, right? But if it's a genuine smile, it's an indicator of being happy to see you, right? So some people would even go so far as to say that a smiling face is happiness, right? It's iconic. So you see what I'm saying? So there's a connect, but generally speaking, there's an overlap there between the iconic and the indexical. But there's other examples of the body too that are really strictly indexical. Yeah.
Like dry lips is a symptom of being like dehydrated, so that would be an index.
Okay, right. So it's like a symptom, right? So it's what a doctor does. A physician checks your symptoms, various vital signs or obvious symptoms, and then makes a diagnosis. So that's a function of indexicality. So the symptom, the manifestation, the dry lips or whatever it may be, is connected to the malady or the disease or whatever it might be. Okay? All right. So, any other examples of index? Yeah.
Eye contact.
What about it?
For instance, usually when people are lying, they don't like to make eye contact.
Okay, so we have to be careful with that. Because certainly in some cultures, eye contact is not valued as much as it is in other cultures. So not making eye contact doesn't necessarily mean that there's deception. And conversely, someone who's a pathological liar will practice eye contact because they think that if they don't make eye contact, they're going to think they're lying. So they cultivate it. And we have some really good pathological liars in here, right? As I recall. So you all know that you got to practice your eye contact when you're lying, right? But there's other symptoms, sweating, which is involuntary. You can't really control your sweating or your nervousness that well. You can try. Okay, what else? Yeah.
Maybe pointing.
Yeah, pointing itself, right? You.
You're giving someone directions somewhere, like go that way, go this way.
Exactly, okay. All right, good. Now how, yeah,
What about someone's name?
pardon?
Someone's name?
Name. Naming is really an important indexical function, okay? Because when you hear your name, you respond. Your name doesn't look like you. It's not an icon. It can have a symbolic function, right? But typically a name is an index of you. If there's more than one person, if there's more than one person in a room who has the same name, and that name comes up, you react or you respond, whoever you, even if it's not addressed to you necessarily, because it's pointing at you. It's a function of you. Okay, what else in language functions indexically? Pronouns. Pronouns are indexical. All right. Right now, Raphael is videotaping this lecture. He has to move the camera around if I move around too much. Right? So you know that my use of he refers to Raphael. Because they're connected, it's connected to his name in the sentence. That's an indexical function. Address terms are indexical. How you address somebody else is an indicator of your relationship or their status, and your acceptance of their status, potentially. Addressing me as doctor or professor or mister or whatever shows respect is an indicator of my status, is an indicator of your relationship to me. Right? So, indexes function throughout language, through our bodies, in a variety of different ways, and they can combine with icons to form more complex signs, which we're going to look at in a minute. So we'll come back to this once we get these definitions out. Okay, a symbol. What's a symbol? How does a symbol represent? By the way, I went through all of this in the notes that you can download from the website, right, with more elaboration and background on semiotics and so on. So make sure you take a look at those notes. How does a symbol represent? By virtue of what?
Gesture.
Well, no, it's not. Gestures are, there's a principle that's associated with the representation. Like, so, for example, the principle of representation for an icon is one of resemblance. For an index is one of contiguity. And for the symbol, it's because what? We agree.
It's cultural.
It's cultural. That's right. Well, they're all cultural, I guess. But it's conventional. Conventional is a better word. It's by convention. We agree that this is a microphone. Microphone. A tiny phone. Right? Yeah.
What notes do you want us to read online?
Pardon me?
What notes do you want us to
Chapter 5 notes. There's two different ones. I'm trying to get through both of them today. We'll see. Yeah.
So, like, if that was like a dog's name, would that be like all three because like it resembles something? It's connected?
What's the name?
Like,
Like
say like
Curly?
or like spots or like
Spot.
like patches or whatever.
Yeah, but Spot isn't, I mean, Spot kind of points to his characteristics, right, his attributes,
Yeah.
you know, but it doesn't sound or look like dog, so it's not iconic. All right?
So which one of that fall into?
Well, it's an index of him, right, and it's an indexical symbol, it's a combination of the two. So it's a name, and it represents him by virtue of convention. So, you know, it's kind of a mix. We separated these out kind of for analytical purposes, and we can say there are pure icons, like a photograph, and there's pure indexes, like a symptom, you know, and there's pure symbols. But in everyday life, they get mixed up and overlap with each other and form considerable complexity and potential controversy. Okay, so we have symbols that, like the Statue of Liberty is a symbol of liberty, right? Right? We see that, we think freedom, liberty for all, and so on. We have, but in everyday life, we have words that are symbols, right? Even the word doesn't resemble what it represents. It's not connected to what it represents. We all agree that a word means a word. A table means that, right? And of course, the more abstract we get, like with terms such as freedom and equality and dignity and integrity and so on and so forth, the meanings become a little bit more diffuse, and we have to argue about what they mean and their application in a particular case. Okay, so symbols function by convention, and they are typically, they represent their objects by convention, and they are arbitrary. That is, there's no natural linkage. They're not motivated by what they represent, okay, through resemblance. They're not connected to their objects. We just agree arbitrarily that they mean what they mean in a purely semantic way, purely semantic sense. All right? Okay. Any baseball fans in here? How many are baseball fans? You excited about the World Series? Anybody? Nobody? I was baptized a Cub fan in Illinois. I won't tell you how many years ago, but it's been a while. So, you know, this past weekend was a real high for me. Who are the Cubs playing? Huh? Any Cleveland fans in here? There are? I'm sorry. Because we got problems with Cleveland Indians.
Everyone else did too.
Huh?
Everyone else did too.
What do you mean?
Everyone else is like,
What's this?
Symbol.
Anybody of Native American heritage in here? What we got here? You insulted? No. You put an Indian fan?
No.
No. Well, they named Indians. I mean, the Washington Redskins. I mean, give me a break, right? Can you imagine? These have become so conventional that we don't think about their derogatory use, right? So what do we got here? Let's just focus on Chief Wahoo. This is Chief Wahoo. Y'all know Chief Wahoo? You ever seen him before? Huh? A giddy Indian, right? Look. What is it? Semiotically, what is this image? What are its properties? And how does it mean? To whom? What is it? Huh? It's a mascot for the team. I don't know. You been to Cleveland Indian games? Is there like a Chief Wahoo dancing around out in the field? There used to be, right? I know, like the Illini. I mean, I grew up in Illinois, and there was always a chief, you know, guy in a costume with, you know, headdress, doing dances, you know, classic Indian dances on the football field during halftime, and they stopped that. They don't do that anymore, even though they keep the name Illini, which is Indian, Native American. So what's Wahoo? We have the map here. Let's do an analysis of this image.
Well, it's a mascot for the team, but also it's a symbol of stereotyping of Native Americans, then it could be
Right.
offensive.
Is it iconic? It has iconic features, right?
Because it's,
Well,
resembles a,
it resembles the stereotype,
yeah.
right? It resembles the stereotype of the Native American. What are its indexical features? It's an indicator of what? The team. That's right. It's an indicator of the team. What's it a symbol of? Well, kinda, yeah.
Pretty much the good and bad of American culture.
Right,
because
that's
it's
right, that's right.
baseball and like stereotyping.
So you have to think in terms of its connotations to get at the symbolic force, okay? Because certainly, there's going to be protests in Cleveland tonight. You know this. There were protests in Toronto. Native groups protested outside the stadium during the American League Championship Series, yeah.
I'm from Toronto, and if you like even say the word Indian at home, like it's not okay.
Right,
Like you don't use that word.
right.
So I think that's why they're protesting.
Yeah, I mean, they have Blue Jays up there, right? And maple leaves and wonderful nature symbols for teams. Not the subjugated people that have, in this country as emblems. All right, so we got a problem here with the mascot. And the same with the Washington Redskins. What else? Any other? I mean, the Cubs, they're innocent, right? Just the little bears. So, no big deal. So we got Cubbies. So you get this, we can see in this very, very, very complex image all three of these signs operate. Okay? All three are operating in this image. And then we got a name up there, Franklin. It's the name of a company that makes gloves. We got the little Major League Baseball image up there that's iconic. So we have an iconic symbol, and we have a symbol. All right, and then we have this very, very complex sign here of Chief Wahoo. Okay, so now let's transfer this to an intercultural context. How can we use these concepts to help us as we adapt to or attempt to assimilate into another cultural world? What's the importance of these things? Why is it important to be able to sort them out interculturally? Any ideas?
Well, for one thing, we wouldn't want to make like the long nonverbal
Gesture. Okay, all right. We want to try and learn what the appropriate gestures are. All right. Can you think of some appropriate and inappropriate gestures that someone might make a mistake about if they're adapting to the United States? Or do you have any other examples? All right, well, back to the middle finger. I think most people know that in America, if you flip someone off, that it's not nice, usually. Unless it's a friend and you're just messing around. Yeah. Well, someone else have their hand up here? Yeah.
Like if you go over to Japan, like they bow.
Yes.
And if you're American, that probably doesn't happen a lot over in America. So.
Right. I mean, how you bow makes. We talked about this a little bit before, right? How you bow makes a difference, and certainly there's indicators of status in the bow, and there's indicators of gender in the bow. Okay. So I don't know how a transgendered person would negotiate this necessarily, but But, there's certain ways that a woman bows and a certain way that a man bows. And there's a certain way that you bow if you are lower status as opposed to higher status, and so on. These are all indicators. They're indexes of status. And politeness. Status and politeness, and distance as well. Because you don't want to bump into anybody when you bow. Right? You don't want to hit them with your head.
It's embarrassing.
That would be terrible. Okay, what else? Any other examples of how we can analyze signs, other cultures? Yeah.
Doctor of the geography, when he came to America, he had trouble with the middle finger because that's how he adjusted his glasses.
Oh, with his middle finger.
And he kept getting like poked fun at, and he didn't know why, until they understood that that was like an offensive gesture.
So he learned. Did he change his habit?
Yeah, he does it with both hands.
Oh, he does? I had a 6th grade teacher, this old woman, who would do this to us all the time. She'd point on the board, here and here and here and here. And we'd just be yucking it up, in the classroom, Mrs. Thompson, flipping us off in the room. Okay, all right, you guys really want to talk about the middle finger today, don't you? Yeah.
There's this boy I know, and he has like a form of Asperger's.
Uh-huh.
It's not exactly the same, but he saw his parents, like his dad slapped his mom's butt. Just like, just like normal, because that's what people do, I guess. Yeah. Like married people do. And then he like came to school and slapped this girl's butt.
Oh,
Because he thought that that's like how you showed that you love.
you showed your affection.
Yeah, and stuff
Slapping
like
on the
that.
butt.
And like it was a huge ordeal, and they called the police.
Maybe Donald Trump has Asperger's. That could explain everything, right?
But yeah, I felt bad for him.
Yeah, no kidding. No, that's a great example. You kind of modeling behavior, you think that's what it means, and then you find out differently. Okay, what else? Adapting to another cultural, and people who have Asperger's or autism certainly are living in a very different cultural world with different conventions associated with their malady, right? So they have great difficulties adapting to normal life, what we consider to be normal everyday life. It's a struggle for them. Someone who has Tourette syndrome, who has a tic, right? In some way, there's difficulties in just getting through a normal activity without having a reaction of some kind. So we can talk about disease in that respect. But in terms of adapting to another culture, what are some other symbols or indexes or icons that we need to be familiar with or attune ourselves to, for example, in that adaptation process?
I can't completely remember like the little logistics of it, but in South Korea there's a specific way you have to have the sake board when everyone's sitting there. Like one person, the youngest I think pours the oldest with both hands, and the oldest pours the youngest with one hand to show that they're the oldest.
You've been to South Korea?
No, Doctor talked about it.
Oh, okay, similar in Japan
Yeah.
with beer drinking. Or sake or beer, or whiskey, whatever it is you're drinking. Typically the other pours for you. So, it's a ritual. It's an important ritual. I should have brought some sake glasses and stuff. But what happens is, this is the cup, this is your cup, right? Sitting there on the table, it's in front of you. And there's a liter of beer, usually, and you can't buy like a 12-ounce bottle of beer in Japan, I don't think. There's always liters of beer, 2 cups, and you don't pour your own. That's it's kind of an insult. The host, especially if it's the host, will pour your glass. You pick it up, tilt it a little bit because you don't want all foam, right? And then you drink it right away? No. You set it down. He sets the bottle down, he or she. Then you take the bottle and you pour his beer. Now, if it's your host, he or she has a job to keep your glass full all night long. This creates some problems because you never know how much you've been drinking. Right? Because every time you look down, it's full. Right? So if you're drinking, drink half of it, you set it down, it's, you're getting more. So you have to be careful, yeah.
I just said in our culture, it would probably be similar if you were
In Germany.
a drink and you knew someone who poured their drink first and then yours.
Yeah, it's a wonderful little ritual, really. I mean, it's a kind of an acknowledgement. Any other examples? What about eating behavior? We talked about food and eating a little bit here. Yeah.
For example, in some Indian cultures, if you don't make sound when you eat, or if you don't like.
You make sound.
Yeah, but like if you don't make sound, or if you like are like really neat when you eat,
Yeah.
that's disrespectful for them.
Right. You want to make a little noise, like with noodles. You know, not sloppy. You know, but a little bit. That's a sign of. It's a sign of respect, an acknowledgement to. Yeah.
I was gonna say, if you go over to Italy and you eat pizza with your hands, you will have so many dirty looks.
Oh yeah.
Oh, they do not like it. They eat it with a fork and knife.
What are you talking
Right.
about? That's not true.
Really?
You have an
My
Italian
girlfriend's
sitting
from
next to you,
Italy.
so you better be careful.
We all eat with our hands.
Oh, my girlfriend's from Italy, and she said that like her grandma taught her like, no, you eat it with a fork and knife.
It's
See?
personal. There's
There we go. You're wrong.
Yeah, I guess so.
Why? Why do we believe Raphael and not you?
He's actually from that culture.
Yeah, so, he's got validity, right?
it's personal. Either way, you're not looked bad at.
Huh.
Maybe some cities, but
Maybe in some cities, like Florence. What?
I don't know.
I mean, where do we need to avoid?
I don't know. Even restaurants, you can eat with hands. No one looks bad at
Just
you.
about anything? Or just pizza, you mean?
Pizza.
Pizza, yeah.
Pizza.
It's like bread, It's like eating with bread, yeah.
In China, you're not supposed to finish your plate because they
Okay.
feel that it's disrespectful to clean your plate entirely because they thought that they didn't give you enough food, and no matter how many times you clean your plate, they will literally keep feeding you.
Filling it up. It's a little different in Japan because if you eat every kernel of rice in your bowl, you're done. But if you leave a little bit in your bowl, it means you want more. It's an index. It's an indicator. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. Does it? Yeah, but that's how it is in Japan. Kind of the opposite. It's interesting. Anything else? Any other examples in terms of adaptation? You got the idea? Okay, all of this is to suggest a couple things. First, that we can adapt. We can learn the icons, the indexes, the symbols, the languages, and how they function, how people use their bodies in other cultures. We can adapt. We can do it. We can pay attention and we can learn and we can adapt. Yeah.
What do you mean by the higher?
Okay, so these are examples of iconicity in language, in grammar. All right? So each one has an additional phoneme. This has 2 additional phonemes to this, right? This has 3 more than this, and 1 more than this. And the meaning is an increase. All right? This is high, this is higher, this is highest. And the function, iconically, is the same for the opposite word. Okay? It's more low and most low. This is more high and most high. So they function in the same way. In any kind of sequence like this that involves an increase of something. So that's an icon. That's an example of iconicity in language, in grammar. Okay, so all of this to set up a discussion of linguistic relativity. All right. Any questions about any of this? Linguistic relativity. We have a strong version and we have a weak version. What's linguistic relativity mean? the relationship here between language, thought, and reality. And what's linguistic relativity? That language, the strong version says, that language determines our thinking. It determines our thought. Determines and constructs reality. Okay? In the strong sense, it determines. This is the word. It determines this relationship. Okay? So language determines thought, determines reality, and this relationship is a function of language. All right? So it determines. The weak version of linguistic relativity is what? Not that it determines, but what? Other key word here. Anybody?
Influences?
Thank you. Influences. Okay, so what's the difference here? I mean, and how does it pertain to intercultural communication? If language determines our thought and our reality, our relationships, it's deterministic. What's that presuppose about intercultural communication?
That, like, if there's no word for something, then someone isn't even gonna think about it really at all.
Okay, so if there are words, terms, phrases, references in one language that don't have a parallel word or phrase or in another language, in the other language, then we can't think it. We can't know it. Right? That's one implication here. That there's a lacuna. A lacuna is a gap between one language and the experience, and the lived experience, the psychology, the social psychology of one group and another, and they cannot connect. There's no linkage, there's no possibility for overlap. That's a strong version of linguistic relativity. So, in other words, people would say, hey, if you're not Japanese, you can't possibly understand what I'm talking about. Okay? If you're not from a particular place, no matter how much I try to explain to you, you can't get it. Because after all, you don't know Arabic, or you don't know Russian. So the strong version of linguistic relativity says that language determines our thought and our reality and our relationships and so on. And if you're not from there, you're never going to be able to get it. All right? Think that's right?
I think it kind of sounds like ethnocentric. Like,
Well, it certainly creates strong barriers between people of different cultures. So that's why most scholars, who agree with the whole idea of linguistic relativity say that we have to think in terms of a weak version of linguistic relativity. That is, that yeah, it influences us, but it's not deterministic. That means that others can grasp the concept if it's explained and elaborated on well enough. so that there can be overlap. We can find in our own experience, okay, or in our own language, ways in which that foreign idea, that foreign concept, can be translated. All right, it's about translation.
Yeah, I think the weak version is fine, but the strong version is too strong.
Strong versus too strong, yeah. Because, languages by definition are translatable. Now that doesn't mean that there might be some cultural histories, traditions that nobody else can live through, I mean, if you're from that culture and you have that tradition and you're attached to that particular history, I can't just graft it onto my own history and tradition, You understand the difference? So we can translate languages and we can learn other cultural practices and we can gain a knowledge of the history and an appreciation for the traditions, but I can't live that tradition like one who has grown up in it has. You understand? You following me? That's not translatable. That doesn't mean I can't grasp it cognitively, conceptually, and immerse myself into it in some way and become socialized in it. All that can happen, but it's not going to match onto the experience of one who's grown up in that world with that language and with those traditions and with those practices and so on. All right, so intercultural communication advances the weak version of linguistic relativity. The idea that, language influences how I think. Actually, I like the idea that language teaches me my thought. So there's a recursive relationship, actually, here. A recursive relationship. Mutually influenced. It's mutually influencing. Certainly, an event can be experienced and then can influence how I speak. Like the strike last week, I was on the picket lines. It was a new experience for me. I'd never been on the picket line before, carrying a sign around. And it's an experience that I had that I can now talk about and understand it in a way that I didn't understand it before by virtue of my immersion into it and being part of it. All right, so now I know what a picket line means in a way that was not just conceptual, it wasn't just cognitive, right? The book is making these distinctions. It's bodily. It's bodily. It's corporeal. I understand it corporeally now. Right? In ways that I never did before.
Now we know how a strike would affect people that are like on the other side of it too.
Right. That's right. So there are many complexities involved. Those who did cross the picket line who were faculty, and there were a few, not many, in the state system, 5,500 faculty, from all reports, they were pretty close to that number who didn't go to classes. Well over 5,000 faculty didn't show up for classes those 3 days. Well over. It could be 54. I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 per university. So the understanding of this term also became more corporeal for me. This term. The power of that, I've always thought about it abstractly. And we use it in a way to symbolize loyalty and togetherness and pursuing a particular common end and so on. But, from the experience of the strike, I came to know what that word means in an embodied sense, in a corporeal sense. okay? Not just among the faculty, but between faculty and students, because we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students join us, some of you perhaps, on the picket line or came in and bought us food, you know? Brought us all kinds of food, mostly pizza, but, you know, we ate with our hands. But, you know, other things, water, food, students were bringing us stuff. The very first morning at 5:30 in the morning, we gathered out here last Wednesday. At 6 o'clock, who showed up? The bagpipers. Chills went through my spine. Then what happened later in the day? The marching band showed up. Right? So we had solidarity with students, and they were expressing it in a lot of different ways. Then guess what happened? Waste management truck pulls up to pick up the garbage. He gets out of the truck, he comes up to us and says, "What's going on here?" We said, "It's a strike." He said, "Okay," and he drives away. He wouldn't cross the picket line to pick up the garbage. Local labor unions refused to cross the picket line to do any kind of work. Solidarity, right? So the solidarity, the merchants were supporting us. They were sending food. Some of them, not all. Some of them put signs in their windows. So, you know, it grew out in the community and across the state in ways that, you know, were not always predictable. Okay, so this term was not just, it's not just an abstract term, cognitive term. We understand what it means cognitively. We understand that it's a word, semiotic, you know, it's a sign that we know what it means cognitively. But, you know, it had a huge effect corporeally for those of us who were picketing, yeah.
I'm still confused on what like solidarity means.
Solidarity means everybody comes together to support a common cause. Everybody comes together to support a common cause. I mean, by your not coming to class, that was an expression of solidarity. It may have been for you just an excuse to go home early for the weekend, or to party, or to sleep, or whatever the case may be. But that absence sent a message to the administration. So all of these kinds of things fed into what this means, because we lived through it in a corporeal sense. It became embodied as a, you know, in a way that had not been embodied before. All right, the point of this is, you know, the idea of solidarity, it wasn't deterministic. We didn't know for sure how many faculty were going to honor the picket line or join on the picket line, right? It wasn't deterministic, but that term, you know, we just kept using that term, and it influenced people's actions. It influenced how people thought, right? How they framed conceptually what was going on, and so on. Even if they didn't really know the details of the dispute, still there was great support for a common cause. So this is an example of embodying a term, right? Embodying a term. And it has universal significance too. It has universal significance across cultures. All right, now here's a term that doesn't. This is distinctively Japanese, and there's an example of Chinese term at the end of the chapter, but we'll use this one. Or just amai. It's a verb, to amai. This is a Japanese term. And there's no adequate English translation for it. Right? So we have to work with different concepts in order to grasp what this means and really live in the Japanese society and culture and interact with Japanese people to really develop a strong sense of what this term means. So the inadequate translation is dependence. dependence, but it doesn't grasp what amai is for a Japanese person. A fellow by the name of Takio Doi has written a book called The Anatomy of Dependence in English, where he focuses on amai. There's a whole constellation of other terms that are associated with amai that help kind of configure its meaning. So to depend on someone is the prototypical example, the paradigmatic example, is how a child depends upon the parent. Okay? An infant depends upon the parent. It's fundamental. It can't care for itself.
I think it must be about like people helping each other out.
It's not just about people helping each other out, but that's a good start, okay? Because it's more a matter of generosity and tolerance and acceptance of the other's needs, okay? So, another way to think about it is a Freudian notion of identification, because the infant identifies with the mother especially. Because in Japan, the infant is in front like this, you know, when the mother is out or needs to carry the baby, it's not on her back or in a carriage or anything else. It's wrapped in this big cloth, right? You see this in other cultures too. So the baby is always right here, looking at the mother as an identification. So that notion of identification and dependence plays out throughout the society, in the family, in the community, in organizations, in schooling, and so on. The sense of dependency on others, and especially on others who are in higher positions, right? Like a teacher with a student. So to amai on someone is to seek their acceptance, to seek their help, their acceptance, their guidance, okay, and so on. Now look at how elaborate I've had to be in order to express this single concept. If there's a Japanese person in here and I said amai, they would just go, oh yeah, we know amai. We don't have to go into that elaboration. And we can't find an adequate term that's going to represent the same idea or experience. So we have to elaborate on it. That is the attempt to fill the lacuna between the two languages. And it illustrates how we can understand, we can understand by virtue of the fact that we can find language to express it cognitively, and we can go to the culture, we can go to the society, we can live there for an extended period of time, and we can begin to embody the idea as well, to amai on someone else. What that means, what it entails. Not just what it means, but what it entails. To amai on someone else. We do it too. It's already happened today from students to me. I've gotten a couple emails. Dr. Smith, I'm not really well today. I'm not going to go to the doctor. Can I get an excuse, can I have an excuse to have this even though I'm going to go to the doctor? Will that be okay with you? Please let me know. That's amai. What's happening? By your grace, right? By your graciousness, will you give me this? And I can say, no, sorry, you got to go to the doctor and give me an excuse. That would be not fulfilling amai. That would be repressing amai. That would be repressing it. Right? Now, I wouldn't necessarily turn that student into an enemy of mine, but I'm certainly not going to endear him or her to me, right? There's not going to be any endearment. Not that I'm seeking endearment, or that he or she is necessarily. You following me here? This is we do this. And we can understand it, but we don't think of it in these terms, in a formal system of terms, or configuration of terms in a language, yeah.
What would be like a word or something from English that would require a lot of explanation for another culture?
Anybody can think of a term in English that would require, maybe some of our international students. Is there any word or term that you've heard that you're like, what is that? That you have difficulty translating to? No? Yeah.
I grew up when I was a teenager. I went to high school with a friend who came straight from Thailand and was constantly explaining different things. He'd come to me and ask me, what does this mean? And eventually he adapted.
Okay, right, okay. Well, you ever try to explain something very simple to someone who has no experience in, like baseball? To someone who's never, comes from a culture who's never played baseball or cricket or has no idea. You ever try to explain what a strike is? A strike, a ball, a grounder, a base. I did this, when my kids were growing up and teaching them baseball. And my wife, from Morocco, she never played baseball, never knew anything about the game at all. She said, what's that? I said, that's a strike. What's a strike? Well, the ball comes in a certain range, and it's got to come within that range in order for it to be a strike. She said, well, is a strike good? Well, yeah. It means that they can hit it, or they miss it, and it's a strike against them. Oh, okay. So it took a lot of elaboration. It's very different than a strike. We just went on strike. Well, what's that? Well, a strike is, it's not like when a ball comes in. No, we're out on the picket line. What's a picket line? Well, a picket, you know what a picket is? A picket fence? No. Well, a picket fence has these sharp edges on it, that you, right? You go on and on and on. There's an infinite regress in trying to explain what something means, especially when there's different references for the same word. We turn it into metaphors, yeah.
Not to make it a racial thing, but I feel like when I have to explain what black girls think under their hair.
A weave.
Anybody that's not black.
Right. Okay. So, getting a weave, and you say I'm gonna get a weave.
Yeah.
And people might say what?
And they think that you're getting it's sewn into your scalp.
Right. Right. Yeah, that happened to me. It's all inside. That's great. It's a great example. Have you ever heard that before? Getting a weave?
I've heard of it, but I never really thought about it.
You never knew what it meant? So it requires some elaboration, right? Great. Any other examples? Yeah.
I had this one friend, she was from New York City, and I'm from a pretty rural country town, and she goes, I asked her hey, do you know where milk comes from? She goes, the store, right? I was like, what? She was clueless. She was like, I've never seen a cow until she came back to where I'm from. She was like, oh, they look much bigger in real life. I'm like, yeah.
It's a cow.
It's a cow. Yeah. She was amazed that this thing has white stuff on it. I was like,
well, you know what a grinder is?
Yeah, it's a hoagie.
Yeah.
You know what chicken speed is?
No.
You know it's a marinated chicken and a roll. That's pretty much it. Pretty good though.
All right.
Go to Bradford County, get chicken speed.
All right, here's what we're going to do. We still have a little bit more to cover on chapter 5. So if you haven't read chapter 5, read it all. Read the Nakarama essay. And then if you get all that done, start reading chapter 6. And we're going to keep moving. We're going to see you on Thursday.